Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. We're going to be talking about test prep, the dirty little secrets and scams of the SAT and the ACT, or how to crush your tests. Because, of course, high scores mean a couple things. Means better chances of getting into the colleges where you want to get in, and we'll certainly talk about what it means to be test optional tonight. It also means much better chances of getting merit scholarships at the colleges that offer those. Here's a spoiler alert, dirty little secret about the number one, about these test optional schools. Most of them still want ACT or SAT scores for merit aid. So you may be able to get in, but you may not get money. So I'm Andy Lockwood, Lockwood College Prep. With me is our celebrity head tutor, Marissa Unterberg. Hello, Marissa.
Hello, good evening.
And thanks for doing this again. We're doing these kind of regularly, so I see some people in chat. So introduce yourselves in chat, please, and let us know where you're dialing in from. So hi to Anita, to Song, to Allison Mummers, and to Bob, and Diana in NYC, Kelly from Parts Unknown, Rika, Aparna, Suzanne from Garden City. Nice, couple Garden Cities, NYCs, Northport. Any non-New Yorkers, that'd be interesting too. Sometimes we get people from other countries and other states, but it looks like you can see and hear us okay. Jersey, LA, Powell, Ohio. All right. Atlanta in the house. All right, good. So here's the format tonight. We're going to be fast and furious because theoretically you have other things to do besides talk about college planning and test prep. I mean, Marissa and I really don't, but give you guys the benefit of the doubt that you do. I have a few questions, commonly asked questions and pre-submitted questions. I'm going to try to stump you, Marissa, in our lightning round. So prepare yourself accordingly.
All right.
You seem nervous.
I'm a little nervous.
Okay, good. Keeps you fresh and edgy. But I want to make sure that in the next 25 minutes or so that you guys get a chance to fire away your questions at Marissa. So I'm going to be moderating the chat and trying to make sure that we get to all of them. Just a quick pro tip about the questions. The best questions are the ones that are going to pertain to more than just you. Sometimes we get like long preambles and ultra specific questions, which are humble brag / questions. Is it okay if my kid has a 1600 on everything they've ever taken? Will my college super score? You know, stuff like that. So I'll do the best to moderate those types of questions. So, all right, let's get into it. And if you guys want to ask a question, Nicole, best question already. She wants to know briefs or boxers. Very appropriate question from my kid's elementary school teacher.
Maybe she means legal briefs and boxer dogs.
Yeah. So okay, so Meredith can't hear. Okay, interesting. Meredith, so if you can't hear me, I'm going to type out what you should do. Meredith, refresh your browser. Best browsers are Chrome and Safari, it seems like, for these things. But anyway, there's always some technical issues, no matter what platform we use, even this new one. Okay, Marissa, so what are you seeing out there, just kind of word on the street in terms of, you know, testing centers, anything, any latest and greatest stuff that we should know about?
In New York, it seems to be pretty stable. I haven't been getting nearly as many complaints that test centers are canceled in our immediate area. If you are a New Yorker, I do recommend choosing a center as far from New York City as you can, because the cancellations I do hear tend to be centered in New York City. So if you live in Manhattan, maybe you want to drive to Nassau County or something, if you can, if you have a car or a way to get there. But it's a lot better here. California has been having a really rough time. These last couple of test administrations, I've had a number of students have their testing centers canceled. So, you know, we all just have to have a very flexible mindset and be prepared to just change course at a moment's notice. Just go in thinking like this could get canceled. Let's plan on taking April, June, and August or July or whatever, so that you don't go into like a panic if you do lose your test spot. That said, I always do recommend taking the test multiple times. So it's not the end of the world if your first or second test gets canceled, because you really should be testing again anyway. So register for as many spots as you can, and fingers crossed that things are going to get a little better as time goes on.
Well, I have a sense that they are getting better. I don't know if you feel that way too.
I do. It depends on the region. Most of my clients are in New York, so from my perspective, things are getting a lot better. But in other states, they're getting worse.
Yeah, I've heard California is pretty bad, but not shut down the way it was over the summer. Midwest, I've heard, is fairly open, it seems like. So
yeah, I think all of the complaints I've had have been from California, as far as testing centers just getting constantly canceled.
Well, once everyone moves to Texas, they can test there from California. So that's good. All right, so let's get into some nitty gritty. Do you recommend that people? So you mentioned take the test multiple times.
Yes.
I misspoke there. What's your feeling about taking each test, taking the SAT or the ACT multiple times?
I mean, I'm a little on the fence nowadays because of the scarcity of testing centers for some people. So if you're in a region where you think you might have a trouble getting a testing center, I'm not totally against trying to take the SAT and the ACT, but other than that, I think it's always better to focus on one test.
So barring that, like what's your typical plan of attack?
So we start by taking a diagnostic test, or if you've got like a PSAT score, you can just take like an ACT and we can compare them so that we can figure out which test is better for you. A lot of students have a strength in one or the other. Other students get the exact same score. It's actually pretty common. And in that case, I'll use other factors to make a recommendation. Sometimes, student preference, or if students are better at reading versus math, or how their timing was or whatnot. And then sometimes it's just, you can take either one and just pick one, go with the one that just seemed better to you. But it's better to focus on one because the methods are different enough that it's too much to study both of them at once. And you're kind of diluting your experience. Like, I'd rather you take 10 ACTs rather than 5 ACTs and 5 SATs. I think that's a better way to strengthen your score. I have had students
Wait. Not actually 10. That's just an example, just in case anyone's freaking out.
Well, no, a lot of my students take 10.
Come on.
I mean, practice tests, not.
Thank you. Okay.
Like practice tests for homework. Not actually.
Just thinking they're 3 hours each, 10 times 30 hours of, yeah, that's a lot.
I don't know if you can take the actual ACT 10 times. Like, they have limits, but it's really hard to reach it. But no, I'd like my students to take 10 practice ACTs rather than split it like 5 and 5.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd rather have you focus your efforts on one test over the other.
All right. So getting back to the, let's say someone does about the same on each. What are some of the other factors that go into deciding to take the ACT versus the SAT, for example?
Like, as I mentioned before, we look at reading skill versus math skill. The SAT is a more math-centric test. The math is harder, the math is longer, and the math counts for a higher percentage of your score. The SAT, your score comes from half your score comes from math, whereas the ACT, only a quarter of your score comes from math. So if you're a really great math student, you might be better off with the SAT. However, the ACT makes up for that 25% math that it's missing compared to the SAT by adding in a science section, which is really actually more of a reading section. So because of that, the ACT is more of a reading-centric test. So students who are stronger at reading, they might be better off on the ACT. There's also an issue of pacing. The ACT is a very fast-paced test, but the questions, I think, are a little easier, a little more straightforward if you can handle the timing. The SAT is a slower paced test with more complicated questions. So if you're a slow test taker, maybe the SAT is better for you. If you're a fast test taker, maybe the ACT is better for you. If you're a student who finishes before everybody else on a test, especially if it's a standardized test, and you're looking around like, oh my God, why is everybody else working? You might be an ACT student. Also, students who get extra time accommodations frequently find that they score better on the ACT. Not everybody, but way more than half. So these are all sorts of things that we take into consideration.
All right, so there's so many things you just brought up there that I want to ask you about. If you're just joining us, I'm Andy Lockwood. With me is Marissa Unenberg. I'm the founder of Lockwood College Prep, and Marissa is our head tutor at Lockwood Test Prep. We had a long time trying to come up with the name of the business. We had a contest. So long story behind it. And if you have any questions, pop them right here in the chat. I see a lot of people coming on here. It'll be easier if you can mark it as a question. There's a way to do that relatively easy, and that'll help me flag it when we stop with my questions and asinine comments, and I open up the floor here. So one of the things you mentioned was the science section on the ACT, but one of the things that you legitimately surprised me with maybe 3 to 4 months ago was you just kind of casually mentioned in passing the science on the SAT. So would you care to blow everyone's minds with that?
Okay, yeah. So the ACT has like a devoted science section, but the SAT also has science on the test, but it's in every single section. There are science questions in the reading, in the writing and language, which is actually the grammar section, and in both of the math sections. So it's more spread out, so it's sort of harder to notice, but they are there. And I think there are fewer questions if you compare the number, but you're not going to completely get away from science by taking the SAT.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I hope you guys, I bet hardly anyone's ever heard that before, so I'm curious if anyone has. So just say in chat if you have. But
yeah, I haven't heard anyone say that, but I've noticed it. You know, they have those graph questions in every single section, and they have other questions too that are of a scientific nature.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking you this really is it's going to seem related to the uninitiated, but it's probably not so closely related. Is some people think, well, I don't like science, or I'm not good at science, so I don't want to take the ACT. So one answer is, well, it's on both tests, but what's the other answer?
The other answer is they're not really testing science. It's not testing science knowledge. There are a small handful of questions on the ACT that require you to know something about science. Some of them are very easy. Some of them are rather obscure, but it's not that many. It's more of a reading and data analysis section where can you read these passages that talk about science and answer questions from that? Can you read these charts and graphs and interpret the information in those in order to answer the questions? So if you think that the ACT science section is going to ask you questions about biology and physics and chemistry, you're completely wrong, which is probably to your relief. You don't need to study science facts in order to do very well on the science section. For instance, I never took physics, not in my whole life. I took biology, a second biology course. I took DNA back when it was kind of a new thing. And but I can do all of the physics problems without any trouble. It's just, you just need to know a few basic facts that you probably already learned in chemistry. So even if you haven't taken all the science topics that could be tested, still fine. It's mostly just reading.
So you don't have to memorize the periodic table, which is a good thing.
No.
Or the periodic table song.
Although I was forced to memorize it in elementary school because both of my parents are chemists.
Do they know the periodic table song? They must, by Tom Lehrer.
No.
You've never heard that?
They didn't share that with me. This was pre.
They have to know that. So Tom Lehrer, who was a Harvard professor, you know, he also wrote for the Sesame Street and Electric Company, but he has all these great albums, all these satires.
When did it come out?
This is in the 60s. I think he's still alive, but he
They should have it then. I don't.
He wrote had albums, you know, called like An Evening Wasted with Tom Lehrer, and he's really funny. So one of them was the periodic table, where he sang every element to the
fifth grade.
Yeah, to the tune of like a Gilbert and Sullivan song, and it was great. And Daniel Radcliffe, the Harry Potter actor, knows it. Apparently, he performed it once on some talk show. Yeah, fun fact.
Any potential SAT and ACT students, you do not need to know that. So
We're giving so much tonight. This is I can't believe how valuable this is. So all right. So you mentioned combinations. So what are you seeing in terms of people getting their success rate of getting accommodations for the ACT versus the SAT?
I'm not sure. I think right after all the scandal with like the Full House lady and everything, I feel like the ACT kind of cracked down for a little bit. But I mean, I haven't had anybody report back that they were completely denied.
Good.
I've had people who had to appeal. But as long as you have the proper documentation, you have a diagnosis that isn't new, and you follow all the procedures, I haven't had any trouble at all. What was I going to say? Now I forgot. Oh, don't ask for more than you get in school.
Okay.
So if you get time and a half in school, don't ask for double time, because that is the way to get rejected.
Interesting. Okay. And it seems to take a long time, so don't wait till the last minute. I guess that's.
Oh yeah, if you are looking to get accommodations on either the SAT or the ACT, make that call tomorrow. Go to your guidance counselor, because I believe they both go through the school now. They're kind of changing their policies. Get the ball rolling, and they're different companies. So if you have accommodations from the PSAT, which is the College Board, that will roll over to the SAT, I believe.
Yeah.
The ACT is completely separate. And in order to get accommodations for the ACT, you have to first register for a test. So you can't say, oh, depending on what they say, I may or may not register. You have to register before you can even apply for them. But they can take weeks and weeks and weeks, especially if you have to appeal the decision. So absolutely get on accommodations right now.
All right. Very important. So I see a lot of questions coming in. We're moments away from me going to lightning round number 2 and asking Marissa but first I want to wrap up with some of the other ones we had prepared ahead of time, or I had prepared, not Marissa. So how many times do you think how many times do you recommend someone take the actual tests, SAT or ACT? And part 2, when is the ideal time to start preparing?
So part 1, an ideal world, I would say about 3 times. Leave a little buffer in case some things can pop up. Sometimes pandemics happen. Sometimes you get sick. Sometimes you break a bone. Sometimes the marching band starts playing outside your classroom and that score is basically trash and you want to do it again. Or maybe you're just like an inch away from your ideal score. So give yourself some room. Don't plan the 3 tests up until like the last time you can take it. But of course, now with the threat of some cancellations, we also want to build a buffer in for that. But generally 3 tests. If you have test anxiety, budget for more, because I forgot what it's called. Exposure therapy or something. Like the more you do something that you don't like the easier it gets.
Okay. So
I think if you have test anxiety, try to take it more than 3 times, but typically 3. And who
would dislike taking a standardized test? That's weird.
I can't relate to that, but some people don't like it. Part 2, once you prepare, well, if you're a junior and you haven't started yet, start as soon as humanly possible.
But what's ideal if we have any 10th graders on our families, 10th grader families? What would you tell them?
I really like starting this summer before your junior year. If you've already completed Algebra 2, you want to start probably as close to that completion as possible. So if you completed Algebra 2 last year, the longer you wait, the more of the SAT and ACT level math that you can forget and that you're going to have to spend more and more time relearning. So if you're ahead in math, you probably definitely want to start earlier as well. But I like the summer before your junior year because you have that stretch of time where you don't have the stresses of school and extracurriculars, and you can really devote time into learning the material. Even if you haven't started Algebra 2 yet, the majority of the math on both tests is pre-Algebra 2. But I would definitely plan on testing, in that case, also testing in the spring if you haven't completed Algebra 2 yet. But for students who can't start in the summer, I wouldn't start any later than the winter of your junior year.
All right. So in terms of your approach, which I want to talk about a little bit, then we'll get right into these questions. A lot of times I hear you talking far more about strategy versus content. And I've even heard you say, I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've even heard you say that in some instances, you don't even have to read the whole question on a reading passage before you can start figuring out what the answers are. So can you talk a little bit about strategy versus content and, you know, tricks like that, as opposed to, I know other tutors, particularly high school teachers who tutor, sometimes spend a lot of time teaching the content, like the subject, at the expense of the strategies.
I mean, and that makes sense, because if you're hiring your English teacher to tutor you in English, like their specialty is English, and they're going to want to teach you everything there is about it. But we don't really need to get into the weeds of all the little different nuances about, for instance, grammar. You just need a basic set of rules. So I customize my class 100% for the SAT or ACT. I'm not there to teach you proper grammar or proper math. It's just how to get the correct answer as easily, quickly, and painlessly as possible. So you do need strategy. I mean, you do need content. I don't mean to say like you never should study grammar rules or math rules. Those are very important, but I think strategy is equally important, because especially with this timed test, you can run out of time if you don't have a strategy. But also, the way that they design their harder questions is they write trap answer choices that are there to tempt you and trick you into using them. So I like to train my students to recognize the hallmarks of wrong answer traps and also right answers, because sometimes it's really hard to recognize a right answer. They'll put a right answer in a way that makes you think it's wrong. So there's a lot of pattern recognition going on in our classes and our tutoring sessions.
So do you recommend sometimes that they jump right to the answers and then before they even read the question? Because I think I heard you say that before.
You're probably thinking of my grammar strategy,
okay,
where there actually is no question. So half the question, more than half of them don't have a question. They just have 4 answer choices. And the mistake students make is they'll just read the whole sentence and they'll plug in all those answer choices. That takes a really long time.
Yeah.
You're reading that sentence at least 4 different times. I train them to look at the answer choices first, figure out what concept they're testing, and then you know how to break apart the sentence in a more efficient and intelligent manner.
Okay.
So
classes. Sorry, I was just going to say, so you have these classes coming up. I'm just going to post that right now. If anyone is interested, we're offering a $100 scholarship. The coupon code is Crusher2021. If you are interested, these are small group classes. Marissa, I know that you go through each section of the test. I know you give homework, so tell us a little bit about that stuff, and then what should people do if they're not sure what test to take or what class to take?
So as far as the classes, we start off with strategies for all of the sections on the test, as well as all the grammar you need. So if you've never taken grammar in school, don't worry about it. Like, this is nothing to freak out about. You don't need to have taken grammar in school. You're going to learn everything you need in our classes. I can't obviously teach like 4 or 5 years of high school math in a 12-hour course, but I do review the most commonly forgotten or confused math rules. But I also provide students with a very comprehensive math outline. So you can go through it on your own and try to figure out what topics that you've gotten rusty on and anything you need to rememorize. So we do the strategies, we do the content, and then we have homework. We have real practice tests and real SAT or ACT sections for homework that students should do timed, because if you take it timed over and over again, you're going to have a natural sense of pacing, so that when you take the real test, you're not going too fast or too slowly, and you're not staring at the clock and freaking out. And we also review the most common, like whatever, it changes from class to class depending on the students, but I look at everybody's homework mistakes and I pick some from everybody and the most common ones, and we go over those in class as well. But students are welcome to request we go over any single question from any of the homework. So even if I didn't pick a question, if you want to go over it, students can either email me ahead of time or ask live in the chat. So it's almost like group tutoring in a way. Everybody has an opportunity to request questions or even topics if someone wanted to, well, can we review exponents next week? I'm happy to accommodate what students feel they need.
Oh, you take requests.
Yes, I take requests like a DJ.
So, and if they're not sure which class is right for them, the diagnostic is right there on our website, right?
Yes.
LockwoodTestPrep.com.
And if any of you have taken the PSAT and the PACT, for instance, the pre-ACT, and you need help interpreting the scores, like which one would be better, you can email me and I'll let you guys know how they compare, and we can choose that way.
All right, good. And give everyone your email address, and then I'm going to go to these questions.
All right.
What's your email address?
Oh, should I type it?
However, you can do it as an interpretive dance if you want. Or...
At Lockwood collegeprep.com. I think I typed it right. Yes, it's at lockwoodcollegeprep.com. Or if you go to lockwoodtestprep.com and you click contact me, my email address is listed there as well.
Excellent. All right, so we answered some of these questions ahead of time, which is no surprise. Carrie wanted to know how many times should your child take the SAT. So Marissa said, block out 3 plus or minus. It's really as many as times as it takes to get your highest score. But Marissa, just again, putting words in your mouth, Marissa's philosophy, just so everyone knows, and because I've heard this over and over again, is sort of contrary to what a lot of other test prep companies do, particularly the bigger ones, where Marissa has previously shared some more stories about over the years, where their philosophy is the opposite. Ours here is to get your highest scores in the least amount of time, right? And there's other things to do besides take tests.
But it varies from person to person. Some people reach that goal score very quickly. Some students take more time. So, stay flexible and keep at it. As long as your score is going up, that's what's most important.
Excellent. Okay, see a lot. Oh, Illinois here. Okay, Song. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Are AP exams more important now since the SAT subject tests have been scrapped? Yeah, that is. I'm just kind of telling you from admissions officers that I've spoken to, as well as the guy who makes the software that we use in our college planning practice, who's on the admissions committee at Princeton for 30 years. Subject tests are now more important than the defunct SAT subject tests. So yes, good question. Beth, my son has pretty bad test anxiety, has pretty good grades. Should he take the SAT or the ACT? Well, my vote is yes, to see how you do, because they are important not only for getting in, even at test optional schools, you still want to try, because if your scores are in the middle or above the range, that'll help you get in, but also for merit aid. But Marissa, some people just don't do well on the test because of anxiety. I know you spend, I didn't ask you yet about some of your success stories, but you've had a fair amount of people who have overcome test anxiety, or what we thought was test anxiety, because you actually spend a little bit of time trying to teach them how to cope with that, right?
Yeah, if any of my students share that they have test anxiety, or if their parents do, especially if it's one-on-one, like we really spend a lot of time going over coping techniques and strategies for dealing with test anxiety. And it can be extremely effective. But definitely plan on some extra tests just in case. And just taking the test, just knowing that you have 5 chances to take the test can be really helpful and alleviating your anxiety.
Yeah, or they're just numb.
And the best advice I can give to parents with anxious students is try to remain as calm as possible, because if you're freaking out about the test, it's very contagious.
Yeah, we always say it flows downhill. The stress, anxiety flows downhill. Not for anyone on this call, of course. So another success story that I just wanted to report, we got a few weeks ago from my client, Kim, our mutual client, Kim Petrie. Hi, I cannot tell you how happy I am with Marissa. Look at Nicholas's PSAT scores. He's in the top 0.5% in the country, and we believe will be a national merit honoree, we think.
I think we pretty much know.
Yeah.
He's going to get invited to compete for the National Merit Scholarship. I think it's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah, so it should be.
Yeah.
And I think we have her dad on the phone, Will Davidson. So she just hit her 35 after starting at around a 29, I think.
Something. I think I can't say for sure the starting
Okay.
score, but I think it lived in the high 20s.
She tied her older sister. That was the that was the big news.
Yeah, the siblings always wanted a tie or
Yeah.
C.
And did she do more than just the class with you? Because I know you do tutoring also, which we're not really talking about tonight. But
No, we just did a class.
yeah, so
Yeah, we did a class.
yeah. So one of the things you always say is when people ask you, tutoring versus the class, of course, tutoring is more pricey to do, but it's the same content. So what we see a lot, what we recommend a lot, is you start with the class, get all the fundamentals down, and then hone in on the areas that are going to give you the best chance of improvement with the tutoring, and then you're done. Right?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent strategy. Some families are more price conscious and they just want to do a class, or some students take multiple classes. If that happens, I make sure that we don't repeat the same practice tests on the next class. So you'll be getting fresh material every time. So I have had a number of students do that. Other students, honestly, one class, if you're going to self-study after that, I set the students up for success. So I show them how to get practice tests and what to do with them, how to review it on your own, how to study. A lot of kids don't know how to properly study. So no matter what you choose, there's a way to succeed.
So that's what my daughter Lizzie did, who's a senior right now. And I think from the time she started with you to the time she finished with the self-studying, she went up more than 200 points. I
think it was around 300.
Yeah, she cracked 15.
Yeah.
So that was terrific.
Yeah. I think she started around 12.
Yeah, you're right. But that was when she was 2. That was when she was in utero. Okay, Heather, which test is better, SAT or ACT? Yeah, the short answer is it depends for all the reasons we discussed. Some kids will do better on one versus the other. So
it's very personal.
Yeah.
I prefer the ACT, but a lot of students are going to disagree with that.
You can't show favorites. It's like, which of your children do you love the most? Which of your cats do you love the most? And Bob had the same question, which is the best way to determine which test is best for you? The easiest way is to take our diagnostic, which is right on our website, lockwoodtestprep.com. Some people take an entire test, entire SAT and an entire ACT. That takes twice as much time, and they don't necessarily do it timed, but that would be another way to do it. All right, Teresa, longtime client. I actually forwarded you her email a few days ago. Will you be offering Sunday SAT classes again, like you did before?
I just replied to her earlier this evening. I'm sure she hasn't seen my email yet.
Yeah.
I put a note up on the sign-up page just before because I think I had one other request for a weekend test, weekend class. So if I get a lot of interest, enough interest to form a new class, I will form a weekend class. It really depends because before we had weekend and weekday and everybody went to weekday. So we'll see what happens. For the SAT, I'll probably open one up, see if people sign up.
Teresa deserves it, so let's do that.
Okay.
Carrie, if your child has test anxiety, how often should you torture them to take the SAT? As long as it takes, I guess. Yeah, you have to use your own judgment. But the more they do it, the easier it'll become.
Yeah, and taking practice tests at home is also important, but also taking those real life SATs because nothing can replicate that stress in the home. So
I'll say this is a direct answer, but it's a little off the topic for tonight. But it's natural that we're spending all this time focusing on one thing because that's the topic of tonight's webinar. But doing well in the SAT or the ACT or writing a great essay or getting a great teacher recommendation, these are all sort of like tactical things that are important. But the bigger picture is sort of the high level strategic type stuff. And what I'll say is that in the big picture, there's really no correlation between where you go to college and how successful you are in any given field, whether you go into a humanities type of field or a STEM field or whatever. There's really a lack of proven direct link between whether you go to Harvard versus a community college, and then what happens to you in terms of your earnings, in terms of later in life. And I know it's going to sound counterintuitive. I have all sorts of data that I'm not going to bore you with, and anecdotal stuff that I also won't bore you with. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because I find myself saying that a lot to kids that I work with one-on-one for college advising, because they are stressed out and anxious. It's not necessarily test anxiety, it's just flat out anxiety. So that may or may not fall on deaf ears if you say something like that to your kid, because they're going to most likely, if they're like my kids, kind of roll their eyes and be dismissive. But that's really, to me, that's really the cure for anxiety about all this stuff, which is that it's the thing that makes kids successful in life is the habits, the hard work, their personalities, their ability to get along with others, resilience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, not where they go to college and not what their SAT scores are. So that should, that theoretically at least should take a little bit of pressure off, and combined with what Marissa was saying before, which is you take it multiple times and all that, that should also alleviate that somewhat. But there's no cure, as far as I know. If there was, I'd sell it. I'd get a test anxiety vaccination today. All right. Christine, can't hear any sound. Okay. I was going to go like, but that's just annoying. Suzanne, are either tests curved? All right, answer that one, because that's a good question. We get that a lot.
I mean, yes and no. They call it equating. And for most of the tests, they come up with that curve, I'll call it, before they even give you the test. So they're not comparing you to how the other students did. They've already figured it out based on how hard that section is. And I believe that's what they use the experimental sections for. Every time you take an SAT or ACT, at the end, there's a short section where they're testing out questions on you, and they don't count towards your score. So they're using those to figure out how to curve tests in the future.
So you pay to take the test, and then you're also paying to have them experiment on you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
Good deal.
So each section has its own curve. So it's not necessarily a hard test or an easy test, but it goes section by section. And some sections are much harder and some are much easier, but the harder sections have a better curve and the easier sections have a worse curve. So I always tell my students, if you sit down and you start freaking out because this section seems really, really hard, remind yourself that a hard section has a very forgiving curve. So it doesn't matter. Don't freak out. I'd be more nervous with an easy section, honestly, because the curve can be really bad and one careless error can count for quite a lot.
Yeah, that's so counterintuitive, but we've seen this, virtually every test we hear something, people are speculating that was a hard one, that was an easy one. But sometimes there's real data behind it. I remember probably going back a couple of years when you and I were discussing somewhat frequent occurrence where there were kids who were super math students, and they got, on the first time they took the test, they got like a 760 and they got maybe 4 wrong. Yep. or 5 wrong. And then the second time they took it, they got like a 750 with 2 wrong.
Yeah, exactly. They thought, 2 wrong versus 4 wrong. My score should have gone up, and their score went down, and they freak out. Yeah. That's just because of the curve or the equation or whatever they call it. There's no way to predict which test will have a better or worse curve. There's no particular month or state or anything. It's a national test. So just sign up for the dates that work the best for you. And that's part of the reason why I recommend taking it multiple times also, because sometimes you might have like a curve that didn't work for you. But then if you take the test 3 or 4 times, you're going to hit that test that works the best for you.
Great. All right. Oriana. So we have a lot more. How much more time do you have? Are you able to hang out for another few minutes?
I can stay until midnight.
Good one. Oriana, are there diagnostic/practice tests available for the ACT? Well, the ACT, like the College Board for the SAT, publishes old tests, so they're not really diagnostics. But we also have the diagnostic on our website, which is a hybrid that Marissa put together, half SAT and half ACT. Parvati, how many times should I take the ACT to improve my score? Yeah, answer that one. As many as it takes, but don't go nuts.
Plan on at least 3.
Melissa, what type of science is on the ACT? So you answered that one also. It's not real science. It's really interpreting graphs and charts.
Yeah, I mean, they have different categories. Like it might be earth and space science, biology, chemistry, or physics.
But should you prepare for that, or
No?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I go over some facts that I've seen repeated in tests in my class, but it's just a fraction of a lesson. Other than that, I would not spend a lot of time studying for the science section. Take practice science sections. That's the best thing to do.
Okay. Tammy asked a question we talked about. When should students begin preparing? Ideally, 10th graders in between 10th and 11th grade over the summer. See, I'm paying attention. But, or in utero, whatever's better. Melissa, a basic question. Do students take the test junior year or senior year? Yeah, they do. If you wait till senior year, this ties into what Marissa was saying earlier, you might feel more pressure and you might not do your best. But there are more bites of the apple. We're doing this recording in March of 21. So if you have an 11th grader, you have plenty of other opportunities before senior year to take this. I think they might even be adding. Have you heard about whether they're adding any more test dates just to sort of accommodate?
They haven't said anything. I don't think they. I mean, the president said that all adults will be vaccinated by the end of May. If that's true.
President Coleman of the College Board?
President Biden.
Oh.
So I think if the vaccines keep going, I don't think they're going to be canceling tests. But we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with students. But where things are under control, I haven't been seeing a lot of cancellations. That said, cancellations are up to the schools and the individual testing centers. So it's not the SAT or the ACT that are making these decisions. So, it's partly as luck. I've had students in side-by-side towns. Some of them get canceled, some of them don't. We had one local school district that was open for the March SAT, right in the middle of lockdowns. I had a student take the March SAT in Locust Valley. So
private schools are offering them during the lockdown.
Yeah. So it really depends.
All right, moving right along. Beth, love that song. I think she's referring to the periodic table song by Tom Lehrer. Heather, do you need to study for the SAT? No, you don't. But you will. It's funny. The College Board used to say you don't have to study for the SAT because it tests your ability or whatever. That was the party line, which was so ridiculous for years. And then all of a sudden they said, well, we're going to partner with Khan Academy to help underprivileged kids study for the SAT. And I was like, huh. I thought I remember. Yeah. So
the week before they changed from what they were saying.
They acted like nothing ever happened too.
There's a gradual change in philosophy.
Yeah. It was sudden to me at least. So it's you will do better if you study for it, if you prepare. It's like playing a sport, right? You can probably go out and I don't know, not embarrass yourself depending on who you're playing with if you play basketball somewhere. But if you really want to get better at it, you practice. You have a coach correct you and give you drills to do, and same thing with any sport, you name it. An instrument, same thing.
Out of hundreds of students, there was only one student that I ever encountered where I said, "You don't need my help." And he sat down, he took the practice ACT, and he walked away with a 36 the first time. That was it. One student.
Yeah, that was I remember that Jared Schwartz. Yeah. He and then he got 35, and then he was like angry. So yeah,
maybe we should have signed up for the class.
Yeah, he's at Brown. He's a great. I love that kid. He was great.
Did he take the test again?
I don't think he did.
I would have gone for that 36.
Marcy, what are the best resources to prepare for the SAT and ACT tests? Well, in my biased opinion, you're looking at her right here. But there's also, again, the both entities, the ACT and the College Board, they publish old tests. Daughter also has test anxiety, so love any guidance on that. Okay, we handled that one. Amy, California. Local ACTs keep getting moved / canceled in California. Our kiddo is preparing for the ACT only. How ready is he for the SAT if we're going to sign up just in case the ACT gets canceled next month? Well, I think you said earlier that there is overlap, right?
I kind of lost half the end of the question.
If you're only studying for one, and then you on a lark take the other one just as a defensive move. Will that help at all? The study you did for the ACT, if you take the SAT cold?
It will. There is some overlap, especially like the grammar rules are exactly the same, and there's a lot of overlap with the math. But if you studied for the SAT and then you just take the ACT with no preparation, you're probably not going to be happy with your score.
All right.
So you should at least take some practice ACTs and learn some ACT strategy, because the approach to both tests is different.
Okay. Lee, when it comes to test optional, I'm sorry, I skipped one, but you already answered this. Diana, what if you haven't taken Algebra 2? That's okay, right? Start preparing, right?
Yes, but plan on also testing in the spring of junior year.
Okay.
Because at that point, by March or April is when you will have learned all of the Algebra 2 you need, but there's still plenty of preparation you can do, because it's not like most of the math is Algebra 2. Most of it comes before then.
All right. Lee, when it comes to test optional applications at top public universities, what minimum score do you feel is worth posting? So the way I can't answer that because it varies from school to school. Like University of Michigan is a lot different than University of Delaware. So the way to answer that, the way I help my clients answer this, and the way you can do this for yourself if you're not working with us, is you look at the range that the school publishes. And if you're in the middle 50% or higher, then I would submit that score. Susan, daughter has friends who took the ACT all parts once and then only sat for each separate piece and didn't take the other parts for super scoring. Do schools who super score look down on that approach? One girl got almost a perfect score by taking only one part over and over again. So the backstory is the ACT last year announced that if you've taken one full ACT, then you can go back and take just parts of it. Is that all over the country now? Or is that?
I haven't heard that they've allowed that yet.
Yeah. So anyway, assuming that this happened, because I think they rolled it out, but only in a very limited basis.
I don't think that they may have like done some test like beta runs of it, but as far as I know, they haven't.
They've at least done that, yeah. So I don't know
wide yet.
Yeah.
If you mean like they just took the English and got zeros on the other section, I recommend that.
No, I think the question is, do schools really super score? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So colleges, they swear up and down, and I believe them. But they're only going to look at the scores that they claim they're looking at, which in this case would be the super score or score choice or whatever they call it, depending on.
Trying to trick you.
Genshin, one of the new SAT changes is elimination of the essay starting in the summer. If someone takes the SAT with the essay before summer and then has to take the SAT again in the summer without the essay, any thoughts what happens to the essay scoring on the SAT super scoring? So the way I would phrase that is it going to matter at all? And the answer is don't even worry about that, because colleges blow off the SAT writing section. So it's not going to matter because they don't really look at it anyway, which is why it's going away. So if you feel like you need to take the test again and you don't take writing, it's not going to matter. Just concentrate on the math and reading. Sherry, do you tutor only for English sections?
No, I do all the sections.
But if someone needs only English, you would just
If you sign up for one-on-one tutoring, it's completely customized. But I tutor all sections of both the SAT and the ACT.
Got it. Teresa would love to sign up as only weekdays. We already talked about this, Teresa. Okay. She wants to know any chance for a weekend SAT crusher. Teresa, what you should do is change your name in the chat, and this way you can trick Marissa into thinking there's like all these people who want to do it.
I'll be so confused when only one person signs
up. Melissa, sorry, did you say that practicing the summer before junior year? Yeah, start prepping that summer between 10th and 11th.
And for students who can't, like some students are doing like sleepaway camp or whatnot, then I wouldn't start any later than the winter of your junior year. So the very latest that I would recommend if you want to get like a solid start to studying would be December of your junior year. I don't want to freak anyone out. Like if you haven't taken the SAT or ACT yet, this is now the traditional time to take it. So it's not like you're late. You're just like, I like to get more of a head start so that your first score isn't like meant to be like the spring score. But if you're a junior now,
you finish earlier. I mean, let's say if the earlier you start, the earlier you finish.
Yeah. And there's less stress because
Right.
like, the finish line is so far away. It takes a lot of the anxiety away. But if you haven't started yet and you're a junior, start immediately. Like don't wait any longer than now. Don't take your first test in September or October. That's way too late. That's when the stress comes on.
Teresa, how many students are in the Crusher classes? Well, that varies, right? I mean, sometimes
It varies. I don't like them to get too large. So if I get a lot of signups, then I'll split off another class or 2 or 3, depending on how popular it is. Anywhere from like 5 to like 15 students. Usually it's in the middle, 10-ish students per class.
Yep. And they're guaranteed also, which you can read about on the page. And I'll just put this in chat here. So it's the coupon code is Crusher 2021. Get $100 off. Okay. Should they do the essay? No, you don't have to.
Should you even bother with the ACT essay at this point? I feel like it's going to be worthless without the essay.
That's my guess, but I would just take it once, just
Right.
just in case. But I think you're totally right. D, can a low score in the essay hurt their score? My short answer is no. The average scores at even Ivy, the elite Ivies, are so average. It's shocking. So that's my short answer. Robert, Andy, Marissa, what are your SAT and ACT scores? That's funny. I never took the ACT, and I don't remember.
No, I didn't either. They didn't offer it in New York when I took it.
Objection, irrelevant, Robert. But funny. Genshin, what is the surprising truth about super scoring? I think the surprising truth is that colleges, even the ones that don't super score, they don't really care if you showed improvement or you went up the first time but down the second time but up the third time. What they're really looking for is the anomaly. So if you had 228s and then you got a 35, that is a red flag not only to the college but also to the ACT sometimes. But if you were like 28, 31, then you got a 30, and then you took it one more time and you got a 33, that's fine, because that just shows that you spent a lot of time preparing and you mastered the material, then you did well on it. I'm oversimplifying, but that's what you do in college too. You get material and you try to master it and perform. So that's what I meant when I said that. Okay. When colleges super score, do they actually only look at the highest scores, or do they look at all the scores? That's an it depends question, but your worst case scenario is they look at all the scores, they don't really care, because that's why they allow super scoring. So you're covered either way, even if they do look at all scores, but most don't. All right, good question here from Sung. Can you request a copy of your actual test questions and answers to see where you went wrong? I believe you are asking about getting those answers after, not before the test. That's a different webinar. But what's your answer? How do you do that, Marissa?
You can do that 3 times a year for the SAT and the ACT. For the SAT, they call it the QAS, the Question and Answer Service. And in fact, if you're taking the SAT I think next weekend, March 13th, you can order it for that test. I forget if you can order it through your College Board account or if you have to call them at this point. Or if you haven't signed up yet, you can click to sign up for it. It's something like $20 or $18. I think it's absolutely worth it. For the College Board, you can see the test questions, a digital version of the test questions. You won't see your work or anything. You see the questions, and you'll see what your answer is and what the correct answer is. And I think that's extremely valuable to be able to see what kind of mistakes you made. The ACT calls it the TIR, which is Test Information Release. That's also available 3 times per year. I think it is April, June, and December for the ACT. I get them mixed up. And the SAT, I believe, is March, June, or March and May and October, something like that. But you can look it up 3 times a year. The ACT will actually mail you a paper copy of a clean test, along with the answer key and your answers. So I fully encourage everybody to take advantage of that if you're going to take the test again to see what kind of mistakes you made. Because if you made a lot of careless errors, for example, you might want to change your approach the next time around.
Personally, I think TIR is incredibly annoying. The last thing we need is more acronyms in this between SAT, ACT, FAFSA, EFC, SAR. Why can't they just call it, test answers? But my substantive question to you is it true that you can only order that before you take the test, not afterward?
You can order them after as well, but it will take longer to get them.
Okay.
And there's a limit, like how long after they let you take it. But yeah, okay. You can actually order it after you've taken the test.
Okay. Eileen, any reason to take both the ACT and the SAT? I think we covered that. You want to avoid doing that. Diana, thank you. So helpful. You're both rock stars. All right. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Marissa's like the lead singer. I'm like the stage crew. Teresa, thank you, Andy and Marissa. Always love your webinars. I've been attending them for years. Third one, head to college. Always learn new things. Good. I appreciate all the info. Very cool. Let's see. On the super source question, Susan, the kids really did get zeros in the 3 sections and only retook the 1 section again and again. This is on Long Island. Interesting.
Right. But I don't think they let you leave or come in late. So you just sit there doing nothing.
Okay. Maybe that's
for
what we do.
2.5 hours. I would be bored. I would just take the test just to have something to do.
Yeah, because you can't bring in anything to, like a gaming console.
Sit there, stare ahead.
Okay. D, excuse me. Do the Ivy Leagues prefer students? Do the Ivy Leagues prefer students to submit their scores even though they say they're test optional? Yeah. Well, yeah. The thing is that admissions officers at every college they'd prefer to see test scores than not, because that just helps them. They're not perfect indicators of how well someone's going to do in college academically, but they are good indicators. So in a perfect world, yes. The preliminary stats so far from class of 2021 kids is that the percentage of kids who got in who were test optional versus the percentage of kids who got in who submitted their test is about the same. So there's no advantage to going test optional or disadvantage. Test optional is really designed for underprivileged kids who don't take the test multiple times the way they do in Long Island or parts of California or other affluent areas. So if you're from an affluent area or a private school or someplace where it's understood that you work with tutors and take classes and take it 3 or 4 times and you go test optional, that's going to be different than a kid from an inner city who's very low income, first generation to go to college, who's test optional also. So it's not that different net. I think that's the way to look at it. Bill, I'm a slow test taker and usually end up rushing by the end of the section, which really hurts my score. Can you give me any tips or strategies for slow test takers? Well, one obvious one is the SAT is probably a better test, right? You mentioned that. Anything else?
Learn strategies. Take a class. We have a great one. But yeah, you need to have strategies to dealing with that, and you need to practice a lot. So don't just take like 1 or 2 practice tests. You need to test over and over and over again to try to hone your pacing.
Oh, so it's work.
Yeah, I know.
So that's what you meant when the kid that we were talking about offline, who the mom called and complained, and you mentioned that he'd never gone to any classes or done any of the homeworks. Maybe that had something to do with his results.
I was very alarmed by an email that said like the class isn't working. And I'm like, oh my God, like did I do something differently this time? Like made the class worse. But then I looked in the records and I saw he never logged in once and he never opened any of the homework or study materials. So yeah, you won't get better by doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, other than that, I think he gave it a fair shot. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Oh, no.
All right, Lisa says, thank you for the information. Genshin says, thank you, Andy and Marissa. My second webinar, I can say that you are the best, most informative college prep group. All right, good. Jennifer, you skipped a bunch of entered. My question was, yeah, I've got 90-something people on this call, so I didn't promise I was going to be able to do everyone. I'm sorry. What's the real story about admission to colleges who now say standardized tests are optional at their school? I actually did answer that. They want to see scores, and I gave a fuller answer before. Marcy, I apologize if you already answered this question. What is the cost of the course, please? So I didn't answer the question, but I posted a link to it, which is on our website, lockwoodtestprep.com. We're offering $100 off, and I think is it $795 less?
$795 before the discount.
Yes.
So by attending this webinar, it's actually $695.
You are so good at math. As well you should be.
In our class too.
Susan said the kids sat there doing nothing with these.
That blows my mind. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that story.
Yeah,
I'll be sharing the story for years to come.
That is hilarious. Josh, would you offer more classes in summer? Yes, we got to get those posted.
The one caveat is that they have only given estimated test dates past June. So I will be posting a schedule, but it's subject to change based on if the SAT or ACT changes the dates of the tests.
Good. Nita, do you have a class specifically for strategy? Well, I think every class you talk about strategy. So
yeah.
Meredith, thank you for the good information. And thanks. Marcy, thanks. And last question, D, if a student scores 1540 on the SAT and 35 for the ACT, should she only submit her ACT score? I think they're both, I mean, I guess the ACT is slightly better, but they both show mastery, and just go with the ACT because it's slightly higher. But if some schools want to see both, a very small handful, and the 1540 is not going to hurt you at all. All right. Marissa, any closing words of wit and wisdom, as we were slightly over, but we kept this to an hour, so good job. Anything you want to wrap up with?
Stay calm and prepare early.
Stay calm and bugger on, to quote.
And wash your hands.
Yes. Cleanliness helps your SAT score and chances of scholarships. 20 seconds. Does anyone really watch for 20 seconds anymore? There's no way. Okay. So, all right. Thanks, guys, for being part of, on that note, again, thanks for being part of our merry little band of college-bound families and parents. I personally really love doing these. Marissa, you seem to enjoy it, or you're really good at faking it.
You'll never know.
so it's part of the mystery. So if anyone has any questions at all, if you're on our email list, just respond to any of the emails that I send out. And if you want to, talk to Marissa, she gave her email address before. It's marissa@lockwoodcollegeprep.com. And you'll see on our site, there's a way to book a call with her on this site, which is lockwoodtestprep.com. Okay. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, everyone. And Marissa, thank you.
Good night.